The key question here now is how much stock should I buy? So businesses can't just stop. You stop, you die. You literally just wasted all that time and money. You could possibly do something here to protect yourself.
Hey team, welcome to another episode of The Upside. You've got Zamir and I in the fields. Today we are in Edinburgh and it's sunny. Isn't that awesome? So we are going to talk about the magical word, the T word, tariffs. Brought to you by our man, Mr. Trump, or President Trump, sorry, should do that correct. So Zamir, let's get started because it's all of the headlines and then it's not in the headlines. Well, not as much in the headlines.
Yeah, it's not in the headlines, but I think whilst it's dropped out of view for most of the public, anyone that's running a business that's trading across borders, particularly with the US, it's probably taking up about 60 to 80% of our time at the moment, just to work out how we're going to handle our businesses with all of this, A, volatility, and B, unpredictable.
Yeah, okay. So the common themes we hear about the tariffs are one, this volatility idea, how this is going to come out of nowhere and how we're not coming out of nowhere. I mean, they publish papers on what they're going to do, right? But it's kind of hit and there's that first bit of volatility in that sense that people don't really know what's going on.
I think the volatility comes from the fact that we don't actually believe that anything is stable, right? That's why it's volatile.
Yeah.
There is no stability. Even if they don't change anything, we can't assume that nothing's going to change. That's where the volatility, and it's the same thing with that. So it's unpredictable. Business loves predictability, right? All modeling requires predictability. Yeah. And the minute you lose that, your ability to plan dissipates.
I think that's one of the differences between, well, there's a lot of analogies given between this and Brexit, right? How they're both not necessarily the best things and like shots in the foot. But at least with Brexit, there's an element of predictability, right? This was going to happen. It was going to happen on this date. Now, a few mechanics around it, yes, still kind of dragging on, but generally it's predictable. This is totally unpredictable. Tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs at this price. Now they're not by this amount. Now they're this amount. Now there's a pause. This company gets
Special treatment.
It's donated some money and gets special treatment. That's the hard bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, let's talk through kind of like where we're at now. Because as I said, about 60 to 80% of our time at the moment is being spent how we can mitigate. This is really frustrating, right? And I'm going to get a little bit angry here on it, but it is frustrating because as a business, what we should be looking for are opportunities, right? We should be looking to find the cracks and find the opportunities. But actually what we're spending our time now doing is looking to mitigate and minimize
self-inflicted wounds.
Well, yeah, we're not self-inflicting them.
Yep.
But we're spending our time looking at how we hedge ourselves, not how we can optimize specifically. When something's predictable, we can optimize specifically for it. So it's the opposite here. So what we're trying to understand is what decisions can we make that give us the best cover given a number of possible outcomes. And we're looking at numerous possible outcomes and we're thinking, right, probability wise, which are the most likely? And if we make this decision, what would it mean? Which decision is the least worst decision in case of all of those potential outcomes?
Okay. So what are some of the things that we're talking about with our brands that they should be looking at doing for just to kind of reduce and mitigate these self-inflicted or potentially these issues?
I think it depends on your point of origin of your goods and where you're selling. All right, those are two really important things to say. So let's assume that you're selling into the US and so as a market, because I think that's where the tariffs are really biting hardest. If your point of origin is China, then you're currently dealing with tariffs.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Unless you're in a particular category, then you've got that issue and your unpredictability of tariffs. So the key question here now is how much stock should I buy? At the moment, my cost for bringing the goods over has become significantly more expensive, but I have no strong belief that that's going to maintain at that level for a very long period of time. In other words, I suspect it could change. It could get more expensive or it could get less expensive at some point in the near term future. So what we're basically saying there is do not commit to huge amounts of stock. But there's this other point, and again, whenever I hear on the media, it really frustrates. It's like, oh, well, people are just stopping buying from China. And it's like, you can't just stop, right? So businesses can't just stop. You stop, you die, right? So you need to continue. You need to continue to buy and bring stock over. That's naturally going to have to happen. You can't just stop, otherwise your business stops. So you're going to bring that over. That means in the short term, prices are likely to go up, almost certainly, to an extent, but it's probably not going to go up enough to make a difference. So the other part of it is you're probably going to have to reach into your pocket and erode some of your margin as well. I suspect short term, keep stock, buying next stock at minimum levels that you have to in order just to maintain that flow.
Should you start looking elsewhere then? I mean, that's the goal, right? Ultimately, the goal is to kind of like, especially in the case of China, who it is specifically targeting, should people start diversifying away, looking elsewhere?
I mean, that sounds like the smart move, right? But think about this. Yeah. What happens if you spend a lot? Because look, we know moving your supply chain is not cheap.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely not easy.
So, and it's not easy. Say you do all of that work and you spend all the money and you get your supply chain moved, and then Trump and China suddenly make up and everything goes back to normal where you've literally just wasted all that time and money. And that is a relatively high potential outcome of this. This disappears within 12 months. So you have to consider that as well when you're making that decision. I think you need to start doing the groundwork for it. You need to start figuring out, hey, how long is it going to take and how much is it going to cost?
Okay, fine. But what if you are buying from China? Still, other countries are still being hit with stuff. It's just on a 90-day pause.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important one, right? So, and again, this is important if you're looking to move your supply chain elsewhere, but you might move your supply chain elsewhere and still get hit by it. Yeah. So that's a really interesting one. And this one's even to a certain extent more challenging in that you could possibly do something here to protect yourself, but things may change again, right? So we know there's a pause for 90 days. So you could theoretically in 90 days manufacture and start shipping 8, 9, 10 months or maybe a year's worth of stock before that 90-day period ends. And you're going to take a hit because your cash flow is going to get tied up in stock, nearly a year's worth, not an easy commitment. And B, you're going to have to store it somewhere. So that's going to cost you too.
Okay. And option 3, invest in a 3PL storage warehouse. Like, just read it out to as video as you can.
But then the downside, right? What happens if suddenly trading relations with your country of origin improves? And because at the moment we've already got the 10%, so we know that 10%'s there. What if that changes? So it's not that this is without a downside, but it's definitely an opportunity and probably a fairly sensible hedge. I think most companies would struggle to get a full 12-month stock unless you're really strong cash flow wise.
Yeah, that's going to be really hard. I think a lot of companies are like, you're going to be able to just drop in a whole year's worth of stock.
The other unknown is, right, because you're going up against other companies, your competitors who are considering similar things. And who's going to be, if someone buys at the high point and suddenly the cost drops, you're stuck with that stock at that price. You're not going to be price competitive with the rest of your market. Equally, if you do and you get that hedge, and you've only paid 10% and everyone else gets hit with 40 or 50%, then you're at an advantage. So you don't want to be on the wrong side of this. It's really difficult. So maybe it's a bit of a mix.
Team, we're just doing a whole new segment called This Week on Reddit, brought to you by our producer, Leon. We just hit him behind camera. Shoot, Leon. Yeah. What's going on this week on Reddit? Let's do it.
First question from the Reddit. If I raise prices to cover new tariffs, why am I losing the buy box? Apparently, people are implementing 10 to 25% price increases to offset the duties, but then they're losing the buy box as Amazon's algorithm is behind.
Yeah, so Amazon is like when you increase the price dramatically too fast and they turn off the buy box. So you should always increase your prices incrementally over time. That's the first good advice, generally speaking. But I think as this Reddit person has asked correctly. Just Amazon hasn't updated the algorithm overall to make up for the fact that people are going to be doing this.
Yeah, prices are going to be increasing, and Amazon doesn't like that to happen. So yeah, they'll try and keep pricing down through that. I don't see them making many updates or changes to that either, because we haven't. That's been true throughout a period of very high inflation, and we've never seen Amazon kind of really pull back on that. So slow
Incremental increases.
Surprising, no, that Amazon have not put those changes in.
Not surprising, actually, if you think. I know it sounds like it because you're thinking from a seller's perspective, they should be sensitive to that. But Amazon have always said the customer centric, and what they are is more sensitive to their end customer than they are to sellers.
I see. Okay. Yeah, there is people saying, how soon will Amazon update its pricing buy box algorithms to reflect new tariffs?
I don't think they ever will.
Sorry, Reddit. Does a China-based seller pay tariffs on the sale price while US sellers pay based on their COGS?
That's actually
That's a great question.
Yeah. So ultimately, duty will be paid on the value of the shipment that's being sent. And so, yeah, China-based will pay it on the sale price. Sale plus shipping costs, which is negligible generally from China. It's worth just pointing out that as well as all the tariff stuff that's gone on, the de minimis rule with China got sort of like removed.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, Chinese individual sellers that are shipping are
Kimu. Hashtag Kimu.
But specifically, so what this means is they will be paying duty on that retail price. Yeah.
Are there any Amazon-specific carve-outs, exclusion petitions, or relief programs? Sellers want to know if Amazon offers its own customs duty relief options akin to the government's exclusion petitions or duty drawback programs, and how to apply them within the Seller Central dashboard. Heard about any of these yet?
No, and I would say it was very unlikely, simply because Amazon are not involved in the contract in that part of the transaction. So generally when goods are moved across an international border, that's the seller or the brand that's doing that, not Amazon.
The only thing I've been working is basically donating to Trump's campaign funds. Hashtag Tim Cook.
And can I just point out, right? So it wasn't just Apple that got this right. So it's the commodity code that's specific to Apple's products and accessories. But they also put an exclusion in there that meant that Chinese manufacturers are not benefiting from that.
And so, yeah, donate to Trump's campaign.
So, yeah, it's not all mobile phone and mobile phone accessories. It excludes Chinese brands, which is the first time you've seen that attached to a commodity code. I think that I'm aware of. So, quite interesting.
Okay, here's an interesting one. You guys, do you know what DDP is, delivered duty paid? So people are asking, can I switch to DDP terms for all my China shipments into FBA? Apparently, some are asking if Amazon will accept DDP at origin so that all customs clearance duties and taxes are prepaid, and whether this affects their inventory performance index or storage fees.
So just to point out, what DDP means is that duty is paid whenever you create the shipment ahead of time of the order going in. Generally, even if you did FOB or X works, the duty has to be paid before the goods reach Amazon anyway, because so you've got two choices. The duty paid ahead of time gets paid literally before the shipment leaves. If your FOBX works, then that's going to get paid as soon as the goods clear customs at the point of entry into the country. Both of those are before it gets to an Amazon fulfillment center. So Amazon, in a lot of ways, is agnostic in that relationship. The simple fact is, before it enters their system, it has to have cleared duty. So yeah, it's agnostic on that.
Quite a popular one. This one's coming up quite a lot. Say you're a seller, how should I communicate tariff-related price increases to customers? Many sellers are experimenting with explicitly itemizing tariff charges on receipts or invoices, hoping that transparency will blunt sticker shock.
Well, I mean, you only get an invoice or a receipt once you've made a purchase. So, and sales already happened at that point. So the sticker shock could happen before that. I suspect, and I have seen some examples coming up of this, where people are putting details into their product titles. Sort of like, there are a couple of things I've seen. So I was seeing like not made in China has been coming up in some titles. But I can imagine like price increase because of duty coming into titles maybe. And so people trying to justify the pricing. Ultimately, customers aren't silly. If they can get the product for cheaper on search results and it was like an equivalent product, they're going to see that regardless of what you put into the title. It's a really difficult time for sellers because everyone's going to be waiting for someone else to move first. And I think as soon as someone moves in the category, everyone else is going to follow them. That I suspect is what's going to happen. We've seen a lot of that over the last few years with inflation, effective pricing. And I think this is what comes back to that point. This is going to mean two things. One, customers are going to be paying more, and B, sellers are going to be making less margin.
There's the basis of a tariff. The way I calculate it, there's the only people who went out in all of this are marketplaces, right? So they're the ones who went out because everyone's going to increase their prices. So for the exact same work, Amazon's going to make more commission for the exact same tasks, right? And so all this has done is essentially just fueled that rocket to Mars even more.
I think you're right to an extent. I think that will happen because I think this is going to be inflationary and that will have that happen. But I think then when inflation happens, costs go up as well across the board. So I think the net impact on Amazon will be minimal and maybe not that much advantageous. And fundamentally, this comes down to the simple fact there's no one pumping more money into the system here. So customers are going to have to start making choices. If things are costing more, they're buying less. So this actually comes to a question I had for you, right? We know basic economics, supply and demand. We know about price elasticity, right? So just talk us through basics of price elasticity and how much you can put your price up and how much you can determine you can put your price up within your segment. There's a point at which people just will stop buying certain products, right?
Can I phone a friend? ChatGPT.
So why don't we just talk through the economics of this and specifically how it impacts brands and people selling products on Amazon? And I think, most sellers kind of sit in that 10 to 50 pound range. That's where they're selling at. So what do we know about how consumers purchase it at times when inflation's high?
I think this is the basic logic of all of this. It depends on the category of the product that you're selling into. If it's a necessity versus a luxury good, the impacts of price changes are different, right? So luxury items, they're luxuries. So you get them if you can have them. And so if the price increases significantly, like it's about to, then, especially if it's made from China, then you're going to ask yourself, how badly do I want this? How badly do I need it? And if the answer is, I can wait, then you will probably wait, right? That's really what's available with most customers. Whereas if you're in a category where it's a necessity item, and so you need to buy it on a regular basis, so you just need to have it, in which case, price increase, you just have to buy that bullet and eat that. And so for sellers, the answer is, depends which category you're in. Determine for yourself where are you positioned within your category, and also your category is positioned within a customer's hierarchy of needs, and based on that, that's what's really going to affect things. Though I think in previous discussions, like you've identified, Zamir, with most people and most products, when the pricing is low, a 20% price increase from $10 or £10 isn't going to increase it that much. So, okay, fine. I can absorb that as a customer, and you can probably pass that on. But if you're looking at a $200, $300 or pound item, that's a way bigger increase. And so you may not be so willing to eat that on a regular basis and just to absorb that price increase or that tariff that's being passed on to you to some capacity.
So what you're saying is like, if I'm in a position where I'm like, I've been thinking about getting a new TV, low upgrade would be nice to have. I'm probably going to sit on that and go, you know what? I'll wait till next year.
Yeah, I'm good with like 4K. Right. I don't need the OLED.
Yeah. Okay. But maybe because I'm saving money elsewhere, I'm deciding to do some work around the house myself, I need a quarter screwdriver. That's the necessity then for me. I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're selling these products, you're a little bit more hedged against the shocks that are about to come. Whereas if you are selling things that are luxuries, there's a bit more turbulence potentially to come. What also factors into this, though, I think, is, like we mentioned earlier, is who blinks first within the category. Because everyone's going to be facing the same pains, largely the same stuff. And so whoever blinks first, increases their prices, gives way to the rest of the category to do the same stuff, is probably, that's going to figure out where you sit in that. I think is going to be the other challenge in this.
This is why kind of like Apple will work, right? Because, I mean, a lot of people would say that their phone is a necessity, but the chances are, if you saw your phone, I know them in various numbers thrown out here, a phone that was, you know, a rather expensive phone to start with, say around sort of like $1,200-1,300 pounds, suddenly becomes closer to 2,000. Chances are, I may not be downgrading to an Android. So
Downgrading. We still love you, Android, but sorry, not as much.
But I might just make my iPhone last another year, right? That's what Apple were really concerned about.
Yeah. Or what Apple could really do is not make products that die after 2 years.
They would have to build that into the next iOS update.
Yeah.
But they don't have to now because they've got an exemption. Yeah. But I think this is a really serious point, right? The majority of sellers will sit in that lower value bracket that we're talking about. And so what you're saying is they're going to be actually less affected than they may be thinking that they're going to be. On the other hand, the upper end of that market, that's where they need to start thinking about. So the chances are, again, from what you're saying, is they put their prices up, but their revenues are actually going to fall off on it.
Yeah. No, one thing we're doing, though, we're basing a lot of this discussion on US-led customers. A lot of our viewership won't to be US-led. For people who are selling in Europe, what they're really going to be facing is potentially all of this pent up, all this built up Asian capacity, Chinese capacity in production, which was previously being fed over to the US, is now sitting in surplus and is going to get sent over here to be sold here. And so what I suspect is going to happen here is a lot of deflationary stuff in some regard.
So you're basically saying that they'll offload product into Europe that they had intended to sell in the US and are struggling to sell there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like if you're mass producing tea towels or you're mass producing cushions or whatever, like lamps. Yeah, and lamps, what you need to change there is the socket, but that's not too hard to do because most of these guys just have a USB-C with a changeable adapter at the end, right? So that's all that's going to change on the outside.
I mean, you're right, and I can see some of that happening, but there's not. I still feel that the European market is not large enough to make up for that imbalance. That's good, or extra. So my suspicion again is what they're going to struggle with in the US is again slightly deflation. Is the fact that a lot of Chinese sellers and manufacturers, they can work on fairly low margins and have been known to do that. They hustle hard on it. And I think they'll just continue to do that. And so they will, in a way, they're more affected than they are now, but they'll be less affected than other sellers just because, again, they're closer on the supply chain. I think long term, you're right. But they won't just look at Europe. They'll look at South America. They'll look at Asia and Africa. You do not make up for that US market in just one other market. No. It's too bad.
It's just bigger.
Yeah.
Let's recap because a lot of topics covered. All right. Firstly, tariffs here and not here. They may or may not be here tomorrow, right? But they're a reality now.
Yeah.
Number one, if you are facing the tariffs, if you are a seller into the US market sourcing from China, you should decide whether you are going to buy, how much you're going to buy.
No, you're going to just keep going.
Just
keep going and don't do anything drastic yet. Yeah. Watch this. Just wait.
If you hodl, right, HODL.
Yes.
If you are selling to the US, not sourcing from China, consider buying for a longer period of time and putting it to storage.
Yeah.
Great, because from what we understand, the exemptions will apply to whatever's on the water within a 90-day period, so you'll be safe if you can produce it and get it on the water. Great. If you are a seller selling into the European market,
this is going to affect you.
There's still going to affect you.
There's going to be knock-on effects.
Externalities based on excess supply coming here, balanced again, and this is going to get super economically, but balanced against what happens with the equity markets and the foreign exchange, in which case prices will go up and down, and so there's going to be a little up and down together. But
It's a really important point because the dollar's weakening as well. So yeah, it makes them more attractive.
so you're going to have up and down pressures, but overall, I think they'll also be down pressures.
Yeah.
Fourth, figure out, one, is your product a necessity or a luxury with a fit your person's bedroom for your customers? And within your category, where do you sit at the higher end or the lower end?
Yeah.
Knowing that if you are overall priced at a lower amount, a 20% increase may not really be that much. So if I'm buying a lamp for $14 and the price goes up by 20%, that's not so bad as if I was buying this lamp for $200 and it was going up by 20%. So more expensive products are going to get hit harder than less expensive products.
Yeah. That's something. I think one other thing I'd add is if this feels like a massive headache and a little bit of a mess and quagmire, it is. And we're spending this is why we're spending so much of our time talking and strategizing and coming up with possibilities, because, and I think this is a really important point again, you're not alone. Everyone's in the same boat with this. There isn't a really clear, obvious thing to do. The fact is, there are a lot of changes going to be coming through, and you can't just sit by and do nothing, and you can't commit to anything long term.
Woohoo! Welcome to 2025.
I'm not sure you could say that you enjoyed this episode, but if you found it interesting or you think it's interesting to someone else, please share, please like, and please comment. We would really appreciate it.
And finally, team, Upside, coming to you every Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. See you there.